Hello guys, and welcome to this new tutorial. Let me show you what I have for you. As you can see, it's a nice 3D text animation and it's done 100% inside of Fusion. So let's jump right into it and see how it's done. As you can see here, I have copy and pasted some of the elements from the previous composition. I have my camera rig and text 3D. Let's have a look at the camera first. Let me show you here. I have a very simple animation. And I used the target, so I ended up animating only the translation and the target a little bit. And if I show you my spline editor, as you can see, I eased the beginning and the end of animation. And a little trick that I want to show you is if you click Command T on a Mac or Control T on a PC, you can access to these ease controls, which are really handy and convenient. So let's go back here to our flow. And as you can see, I added these fuse, and it's a wireless 3D link, and you can find these on Reactor. By the way, you can find Reactor over at the WSACless forum, and is right here. You just have to download the Reactor installer and follow the instructions. Be aware that if you're using Fusion 16.2 or DaVinci Resolve 16.2 on a Mac, Reactor won't work. So what I suggest you to do is go over the Blackmagic design forum and report this issue. So let's move on here. And as you can see inside my wireless 3D node, I referenced my camera, and I did this so that I can copy and paste copies of my camera throughout my composition. So let's have a look at the text 3D node, and let's turn on the shading. And if I right click and choose 3D options, I can deactivate the grid. So inside the 3D text node, I extruded my text a tiny bit and also beveled a little bit. So now what I want to do is to copy the text 3D node and paste 4 copies of it. In order to be able to change my text later, what I want to do is to set up some modifiers and some expressions. And I have to move to my first 3D text node, and right here I have to right click and select publish, and again right click and publish to the font and the style. And as you can see, I have 2 new modifiers, which are the font and the style, and I'm doing so that I can link the font and the style to the first 3D text. Next, I'm going to move to the 3D text node 1 and right click on the style text and add an expression, which will be text 3D dot styled text. And here right click, connect to text 3D font, and here connect to text 3D style. And also I want to select the size and type another expression, which will be text 3D dot size. So now all that we have to do is to repeat the process here. So now that we've done so, I can merge these 2 texts together and view the merge 3D node. And what I want to do is to move the text over a little bit, and again merge these 2 3D text nodes and move that over a little bit. And then we want to pipe the second merge 3D inside the first one, select the merge 3D and move it over, so that we end up with something like this. Let's organize our flow a little bit. And now we can add our last text 3D node, and we can move it over and extrude it a little bit. Okay, now that we are done, let's try if our expression works, and let's type something like test. Yeah, as you can see, it works perfectly. And let's see if I want to change my font, and as you can see, it works perfectly. Okay, now what I want to do is to start my shading and material process. I want to add some material, so let's start with the easier one. Hop over the shading tab and just make this material black and leave the rest as is, and repeat for the text 3D one. And this is what we are looking for. Next, let me grab this material shader here and let me paste it right here. Okay, let me show you what I have here. I have this multi-area light. As you can see, I have my viewer LUT activated and is set to sRGB because I set inside my loader the source gamma space to sRGB and remove the curve. And that means that I'm working in linear. So then I added a slight blur here. And I did so because if you can see here, I have some jagginess in the edges here, and I want to avoid that. Then I used a brightness contrast to make it a little bit more dense. And then I used a sphere map, and it is in its default settings. If you want to create reflections, or if you want to create an environment map, sphere map is what you need. And in fact, what's next is a reflect node and a bleed material. The bleed material is used in the background material, and the bleed is set as a black diffuse, and the specular is set to 0, and the reflect node is set to have some face-on strength and a little bit of fall-off. And as you can see, this is our result, and it's pretty nice. So let me add this material here, and let's add a replace material, and let's pipe the shader in, and let's do the same with the other 3D text. So now if I move my camera, you can see that there are some reflections. Be aware that when you're working in linear, your 3D space will not display the viewer LUT. So here, as you can see, this is the difference between the linear and the viewer LUT. If you want to set a LUT that will affect both the viewer and the 3D space, I suggest you to take a look at the buffer LUT. I'm not gonna do that, but if you want more information, just go to the Fusion manual at the page 209 and you will have all the information you need. Okay, so let's move on here, and let's go back to my previous comp and grab this portion and let's paste it. So as you can see here, I have these fractal blocks, which is a macro by Brian Ray, which you can find on Reactor. And then I added a filter node, and this filter is set to Subel. And this is the result of the Subel filter. And then I dilated the filter and merged it on top of my fractal blocks. And this is what I got. And then I add a color corrector, and as you can see, I tinted it very green. And also I added a brightness contrast to clip the black and the whites, and then at last a Luma here. So let's skip the transform for a second, and let's see what happens if I add a replace material here. And let's see what happens if I pipe the material right in. As you can see, I get this strange behavior. And how do I solve that? You need to go to the 3DText node, move over to the shading tab, and uncheck the use one material. And as you can see, we're getting the correct result. So let's go back to the transform node for a second. I needed to change the aspect of my texture in order to have it displayed correctly on my 3D object. And also I added these expression, and basically what happens with this expression is that the transform will move forever on the x-axis thanks to time. Also, I set the edge to wrap so that the edge will repeat forever. Okay, there's something else that I wanted to add, which is a merge material. Let's bring this down to something like that. And I did that so that I have a little bit of reflections on my material. Okay, so now that we have these done, let's add a merge 3D node, and let's call this one text, and maybe show the tile picture so that we know that this is our main scene. So grab the camera, copy it, and paste an instance. To paste an instance, you need to press Command-Shift-V on a Mac or Control-Shift-V on a PC. So this will hold our reference to our camera. So let's see what we have here. Everything seems to be working correctly. Okay, let's move on to the next step. That will be adding a render node. And let's show the tile picture here. Let's change the render type to OpenGL. The anti-aliasing will be set to bilinear. And the rest is okay. And then we have to check this texturing box, because as you can see, the textures are set to 8-bit integer, which is something that we don't want. So let's set these to source, and we are good to go. In the output channel, we only need the RGBA, so let's move to the next step. Let's go here and grab this shader, paste it here, and add a shape 3D node. And let's make it 10 in size. And also let's grab the camera and paste an instance. So now we can add our shader to the shape 3D. So what's in here, again, it's the area light, with a little bit more blur than before. The brightness contrast in this case is doing nothing, so we can delete that. Again, sphere map and a blend set to a slightly bluish color. And also I'm using these fast noise, really tiny, to drive a bump map, really subtle bump map. Let's see if I can show you. Let's make a copy of the render. Yeah, as you can see here, I have this really subtle bump, which is exactly what we want. Okay, now that we have both our background and our text, what we have to do is to merge the text on top of our background. Now we can create a wireless 3D node, and we want to reference our 3D text. And what we want to do is copy the real camera now and paste here. Okay, now that we have a copy of our camera, what we want to do now is go to the transform tab and remove all the animation. Okay, now what we want to do is to pin our copy of the camera and select our main camera. Now all we have to do is to set up some expressions. Now there's only one change that we want to do to our translation group here, and just add 0 minus. So now if I merge these two elements, as you can see, if I view the camera, I'm trying to create reflections. Okay, now what I have to do is to create a copy of my render, and I just need to add a transform node and check the flip. So now if I merge these over, as you can see, I have my reflections. Okay, something that we can add here is maybe some blur and let's see, maybe box and something like that, very subtle, and keyframe this value and maybe make it a little less obvious here. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, perfect. And then what we want to do is maybe add a fast noise and a displace noise here. Let's have a look at our fast noise. Let's make it a little bit more detailed, and let's make it 250. Maybe it's too much. Yeah, keep it like this. And then we want to add a create bump map, and let's leave it like this and hook the create bump map into our displays. So now we want to move from radial to XY, change the offset to minus 0.5, add an expression to the Y refraction, and peak whip the X refraction. So now if I move over my reflection, I can displace them a little bit, and as you can see, maybe now it's a little bit too much. Yeah, something like that. Okay, now what we want to do is to create some lightning effect. And to do that, I'm gonna just do something like that. Yeah, something like this. Let's add a blur node. And blur this one a little bit, and maybe edges to mirror, and maybe decrease the blend. Yeah, something like that. Maybe we need to animate the blend. And oh, sorry, not this one. Yeah, something like that. And maybe also add a brightness contrast. And add a keyframe on the saturation. Yeah, something like that. Okay, perfect. So now what we are missing is some shadow. And how do we fake shadows in this case? So let me show you a way that I found out. So let's grab a copy of this 3D shape. Grab a copy of the camera, paste an instance, and also a copy of the render. So let's merge both these together. Okay, so what we want to do is to add a text plus node, and we want to copy our expressions. So here and now we can do the same with the font and the style here. Connect it to our material input of the shape 3D. And as you can see, this is what we end up with. So what we have to do is to get rid of this expression, and we have to make this one square. And now, as you can see, I can go into the material tab, make this black. And if I merge this one on top of my, as you can see, it's starting to look like we have some shadows. And let's move our text. And as you can see, it matches perfectly. Yeah, I think something like that is almost perfect. Now, what we want to do is a setup like this. Okay, the first one is set 1 and is okay. Let's set this one to 2. And let's set this one to 4, and then let's merge this one on top, and this one on top, and this other one on top, and this is what we end up with. So let's add a pipe router, and you can select all of this and group it, and then we can add that to our shape. And as you can see, it looks like we're starting to see some kind of shadow. So then we can go to the merge, and since we are working in float, we can type 2 inside of the blend, and this is what we end up with. Yeah, something like that seems good. Let's move back to our first okay, so what I did next is basically I've been instancing the whole scene here so that I could render Z-pass. And as you can see, I have my Z here, and I want to use this Z-pass to drive the good old depth blur, which can be useful sometimes. It does the job in this case, so let's see the depth blur. Sorry. Okay, let's see. Then I added a gamut to go back to the sRGB, a fast expo glow, and then I used film convert to color correct my animation, and at last I added this chromatic aberration. I don't think this one is already on Reactor, but you can find, for example, XF Chroma Fuse, which does the same, and this one is on Reactor. You can use this one instead. And so here again is our result. I hope that this video has given you some ideas on how to create some nice 3D text inside of Fusion, and I think this is a wrap for me. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!